It was a warm Monday evening in May 2021 when Orhan Inandy, a 53-year-old educator and a dual Turkish-Kyrgyz citizen, left his Bishkek home and never came back. His Lexus, containing his jacket and 2 mobile phones, was found later that night 8 kilometers away from his home. A week later, news finally arrived. In a televised address, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan confirmed that Inandy had been captured by the Turkish security services and flown to Turkey. In 2023, Inandy was sentenced to 21 years in prison for allegedly heading a terrorist organization. And he was not the only one. That year, Turkish security services confirmed the abduction of more than 100 people in a similar fashion. Many of them, like Inandy, were teachers. Some were based in Central Asia. All were connected to Hizmet, an Islam-inspired civil society initiative founded by Turkish Imam Fethullah Gulen, which ran hundreds of educational institutions around the world. So, why has the Turkish state been targeting Turkish teachers? And what brought these people to Central Asia in the first place? This is Good Education, the rise and fall of Hizmet schools in Central Asia. Hi, my name is Agnieszka Pikulicka and this is Turan Tales audio feature, bringing you fascinating stories from Central Asia, made possible by the International Press Institute. If you like what you hear, support us with a monthly subscription at turantales.substack.com/subscribe. Enjoy the story! Most of the people you will hear in this story agreed to speak to me on condition of anonymity. Many who initially agreed to give interviews eventually pulled out. This is despite the fact that they devoted their lives to teaching in highly acclaimed educational institutions run by the Hizmet movement, which, they believed, sought to create a better, more equal, and more just world. Our story begins in the late 1960s, when the Hizmet movement's founder, Fethullah Gulen, a Turkish Muslim scholar, preacher, and a follower of the Sufi mystic Said Nursi, was still a local imam in Izmir, a port city on the Aegean coast of Anatolia. This is what Mateusz Chudziak, a Turkey expert, says about Gulen.
Basing on the teachings of Said Nursi, Fethullah Gulen developed his own thought within the entire Sufi tradition. He was quite successful as an imam in secular part of Turkey, where he started gathering big crowds around the mosque where he used to preach.
As Chudziak explains, Gulen proposed a new way of belief and religious practice, different from what was offered by Arab countries.
So that was a combination of Muslim Sufi teachings from Anatolia and the Turkish nationalism, which meant we are modern-oriented, I would say. We're cherishing our Turkish identity. Gulen used to say on many occasions that what he spreads is an Anatolian Islam, which is mild comparing to Islam of Hanbali school from the Gulf countries, especially from Saudi Arabia, not even mentioning the Islamic fundamentalism.
In his teachings, Gulen promoted the idea of serving humanity as a path to becoming a better human being.
The movement operates in 3 primary areas: education, humanitarian aid and philanthropy, and religious and intercultural dialogue.
This is Hussein Çelik, a Turkish journalist based in Poland.
According to the Islamic ulema, so Islamic scholars, There are three main problems facing Muslims. First is conflict, which is why organizations that promote dialogue should be established. Second is poverty, which underscores the importance of providing humanitarian aid. Third is illiteracy, which calls for the organization of an educational movement. Gülen believed that these are the greatest problems facing humanity as a whole, not just Muslims.
Największe problemy ludzkości, a nie tylko właśnie jakby muzułmanów.
Gülen's teachings and charisma soon secured him devoted followers who were ready and able to put his ideas into practice. And so the Hizmet movement was born. Hizmet, meaning service in Turkish. It was never officially formalized, remaining instead a network of loosely connected organizations loyal to Fethullah Gülen and guided by his teachings.
And on this basis, they started creating this network, giving 10% of the income for the community. It was composed of the business people, media outlets on the later stage of the development, and education. Education was quite crucial in the teachings of Fethullah Gülen because only through education the pious Muslims could become successful in their professional lives. And through education they could obtain some government or state positions to change the state and its apparatus from within.
To achieve this, Gülen and his followers set up a system of dormitories that helped students settle in towns with better educational opportunities. A new system of secondary and higher education soon followed. The schools were gender segregated and secular, with curricula focused on science, particularly mathematics, physics, biology, and chemistry, as well as languages, especially English, which was usually the language of instruction. This focus made the schools highly competitive, and entrance exams were introduced to admit only the most promising students. School fees, meals, and accommodation were subsidized by Hizmet. Over time, the schools proved extremely successful, producing students who not only excelled academically, winning Olympiads, so school competitions across the country, but were also independent, disciplined, and well-behaved. As Gülen often said, you don't teach religion, you live it. His name is not Yusuf, but that is what we are going to call him. I don't know what he looks like, and we have never met. I got in touch with him through a mutual friend, a trusted contact. His words will be read to you by an actor, and I will not give you any details that would allow you to identify him. This is because Yusuf is one of hundreds of Central Asia-based teachers wanted by Turkey as alleged terrorists. Although he says he has never committed a crime. He dedicated his life to teaching and, in fact, has never held a job in his homeland, Turkey. Yusuf's story with Hizmet began when he was still a teenager.
I studied at a technical high school outside my hometown, so I needed a dormitory. At the time, I did not have any information about the Hizmet movement. I took their exam and I passed. I stayed at their dormitory 3 years and got acquainted with the movement.
In the 1990s, when Yusuf moved into a Hizmet dormitory, the movement was on the brink of major global expansion. This followed the collapse of the Soviet Union, when Turkic-speaking Central Asian countries gained independence from Moscow.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the new gates to Central Asia especially opened, and Central Asia has always been particularly important to the modern Turkish national identity because it is regarded as a cradle of Turkish nation. So pan-Turanist ideas has always been strong in Turkish mindset, and it was no difference. Someone who could be Kemalist, Islamist, ethnic nationalist, and Sufi. For all of them, this part of identity was particularly important.
At the time, the newly independent post-Soviet states of Central Asia, disillusioned with Marxism-Leninism, faced an ideological vacuum and were receptive to new ideas from abroad. Envoys from the Gulf countries, the West, and Turkey arrived, each offering different visions. Gülen's model, with its high-quality education already tested in Turkey, proved appealing, and dozens of Hizmet schools soon mushroomed across the region.
Fethullah Gülen had the political ambitions. The main political ambition was to bring up entire generation of well-educated people who could enter the state institution and change the apparatus from within and then change the face of the Turkish Republic. That was in Turkey, but when we take into account the Gülen movement's activity in other countries abroad, so the idea was spreading the Turkish soft power, but also educating new elites of those countries which could be friendly to Turkish Republic.
With the establishment of new educational institutions, the movement sent thousands of trusted members to lead schools and train local staff in the principles of Hizmet education. Yusuf was among the first ones to be sent.
The dormitory director, whom I respected, became the head of one of the schools located in Uzbekistan. He suggested that I continue my higher education there, and even though I passed the entrance exam for engineering, I decided to continue my studies in Uzbekistan. I went there to study, not to work, but I took on a job as a part-time tutor in one of the local schools. The school provided accommodation, as the tutors were responsible for taking care of the students after classes and at night.
In Central Asia, the schools were a novelty. At first, neither students nor parents fully understood the philosophy behind them. What they did know was that admission was difficult and that the schools came from Turkey, a more prosperous world. Laziz, now 47, works for leading international organizations in Tashkent. But in 1992, he was 15 and among the first cohort of students to join a Hizmet school in his native Bukhara. He passed the competitive science exams and was eager to attend a prestigious foreign educational institution.
And for the second year and others, what surprised me was the very good quality of maths, how they teach maths, and then the textbooks, because the textbooks were really quality. And then, for example, for the STEM subjects, these textbooks were like imported from Cambridge and Harvard, and I remember.
The schools introduced students to a completely new world, one to which most children across Central Asia had no access. Students were required to live in dormitories, which fostered a strong sense of brotherhood, as well as a feeling of belonging to an elite. Education at the Hizmet schools was also of the highest quality. Laziz's parents were Soviet-educated people who grew up in a secular state, without religion. But they didn't mind that their son was learning the basics of Islam.
Oh yeah, they knew about it very well, and all the parents, and they were actually, it seems like they were happy because it was something new for them as well. And there's like, oh, like this, the new guys coming, like this, some guys, like educated guys from Turkey are coming, and they're showing us the better way to live. And then it was like, and there was tradition, and it was like really for an honor for all the parents, I believe, when the teachers visited our homes. Like once 2 or 3 months in turns, like the teachers used to visit our homes. And then there was like, we used to have some party, like my mother used to cook lots of food, and then the teachers would come and they would like, they would be hosted by our families.
Laziz remembers his time at the Hizmet school fondly. Thanks to the Turkish education, he learned a number of skills that proved useful in his further education and later his career.
We started hard to prepare for the science Olympiads. I was in the roster for English Olympiads. I was given so many books in English, English grammar, English vocabulary and something. In 2 years in a row, I was the best in the Uzbekistan for English. That gave me the chance, to enroll in one of the best universities of Uzbekistan, skipping the exams.
For Ali Nur, a 33-year-old marketing specialist from Kazakhstan who entered the Hizmet school in 2003, the schools instilled a strong work ethic, but also taught cooperation and helping others.
Being a nerd at the school was highly valuable. So if you're good at a certain class, then the school would really promote you among others. Another thing is this ability to help each other, which again is a very common virtue among these schools, and it's just a human virtue that should be developed. So helping each other was encouraged, that in case you have trouble with some of the lessons, your classmates would be encouraged to study with you.
All Hizmet school graduates I interviewed speak excellent English and are successful in life. They say this is true for most of their classmates. In a way, they did function in a parallel reality, one that was only available to them, their classmates, tutors, and teachers.
The most thing that it has given me is the ability to study and a sense of brotherhood, which you carry, through your life onwards. So it does mean that I'm very good friends with all my classmates. It develops within you a certain sense of brotherhood, and you understand that you always can rely on people sometimes.
Timur, now in his 30s, studied at the Hizmet school in Kazakhstan for 5 years in the early 2000s. He recalls that tutors, the older brothers who lived with them in the dormitories, played a central role in their day-to-day lives. They were the role models that teenagers in the midst of puberty, living away from home, desperately needed. During evening talks over tea, they were the ones who taught the youth to distinguish right from wrong.
In Turkish, it's called sohbet. Sohbet, it's like a conversations. When you have tea and you have a conversations with your tutors. So each of the class, we had our own tutors who used to be students in the school, but now they are usually the freshmen who go to the university in the same town. They become your tutor and they live with you in the boarding school as well.
So they were not teachers, they were sort of like older brothers.
Yes, older brothers, tutors. In Turkish, it's called abi. I wouldn't say that it was very deep into Islam, but it was like general things that can be in Islam and any other religion. So how to be a good person, how to be kind. You have to bring up something to your society. You have to be a good person for your parents as well. You have to be a good person for those who are close to you and things like that. Don't gamble, don't smoke, don't take alcohol, be respectful to women, to girls, and things like that. And I think when you're a 14-year-old boy, you get into these things very well. So whatever an older brother, a tutor tells you, you will most probably follow it.
Hey, quick little break. Thanks for listening to Turan Tales. We're a tiny independent show supported by listeners like you. If you like our work, you can get a paid subscription at turantales.substack.com/subscribe or buymeacoffee.com/turantales. Okay, back to the episode. Mira, a 27-year-old from Kyrgyzstan, now works for a global corporation. She attended Hizmet schools for 5 years between 2011 and 2016. Mira says that religion was not imposed, but for those who wanted it, there were separate religious meetings. Yet, even for Hizmet school students like her, the meetings had a cloud of mystery, and it was unclear whether something sinister was going on behind closed doors.
They were kind of like choosing particular students to recruit into that system. So like usually if you're getting into that system, they were taking them to the houses where usually sisters were living, and then they were reading some religious books in there. Again, it was not common in Bishkek. I didn't see any of those, but in the regions, yeah, I had a lot of talks about it. So for us, it was kind of like, mysterious rumor about those houses.
In Uzbekistan, the Turkish schools closed earlier than elsewhere. Islam Karimov, Uzbekistan's first president, was suspicious of Turkey, which had given shelter to several high-profile Uzbek dissidents. He was also wary of political Islam and harshly persecuted pious Muslims. The Turkish schools, ordered to leave in 2001, were no exception.
One part was that like people praised like as being elite schools, but some of my classmates, they ended up in prisons. They got recruited into some clubs, and the representatives of those the so-called clubs or whatever I don't know what it was, they came from Turkey to Uzbekistan, and I heard them coming, but they were much harsher on religion than our teachers. And what they promised was, I remember visiting them once, and I was really, really extremely unpleasantly surprised because I saw some of my classmates in Tashkent from Bukhara, some of my classmates who already were there, and I said like, guys, like, what are you doing in this flat? And they said like, okay, these gentlemen are from Turkey. They are giving us some very interesting things about Gülen and his teacher Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, and they are ready to pay for our rent, our flat rental. They are ready to cover our food expense and so on. And I said like, what are you going to do in return? And we have to follow their like religious instructions. And most of those who follow these religious instructions, at some point they were like called these intelligence services, and they were sent to prisons.
Laziz himself also had an encounter with the security services.
I was already working, and it was like maybe in 2006 or 2007, long time after I graduated from the school, and I was like already working in a university. And we had like some party in the evening with my colleagues from my university, and we were enjoying some drinks, I remember. And I received a call, and then the number which was displayed on my mobile was a very unusual one, and I answered the phone, and then I was like invited to come to the intelligence service office in Bukhara to see some officer. And I said, okay. And when I went there, and then he looked at me and said, it looks like you are intoxicated. Did you drink some alcohol? I said, yes. And he said like, oh, well, are you graduate of Turkish school? I said, yes. And he said like, oh, well, but you still drink alcohol? Yes. And then like, so you don't pray 5 times a day? And I said, I don't pray at all. Okay, you are not our interest point, so you can just go. I mean, maybe those who are different way, maybe they had some troubles, maybe.
But apart from Uzbekistan and isolationist Turkmenistan, which closed the schools in 1999, Hizmet education flourished across Central Asia. Gülen schools were prestigious institutions, despite the fact that rumors about their students and staff circulated widely. Many believed that Hizmet students were a cult-like group, blind followers of Fethullah Gülen, because they lived secluded lives in dormitories and did not fully integrate into the rest of society. Some claimed that the real purpose of the schools was to seize power in Central Asian states and beyond, and to reshape the world in a way that would suit the movement. By the late 1990s, they had expanded into the Caucasus and the Balkans. At their peak, Gulen-inspired schools and foundations could be found across the world, in as many as 160 countries. Because they were never part of a single registered organization, it is impossible to count them precisely. But they numbered in the thousands. After Tashkent, Yusuf moved to Kyrgyzstan to complete his education. He enrolled in a PhD program in linguistics and began teaching at Osh State University. But Hizmet did not forget its former member. He was invited to work as an English teacher at one of the Hizmet schools in Kyrgyzstan.
The job as an English teacher was pretty much the same as in other public schools, except we visited students in their homes. It was an integral part of the education system. Compared with my previous job at the faculty, it was difficult and took much more time. But it was a satisfying job, and they had a lot of seminars to improve the skills of the teachers. I felt I was doing a great job, and the feedback I received from the parents and later from the graduates was very positive. Almost all my students entered and then graduated from universities in Kyrgyzstan and around the world.
After years of living in Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan began to feel like home. Yusuf never worked in Turkey. It was Tashkent and later Osh that shaped who he became.
It was easy for me to work in Kyrgyzstan, and I got along with the people. Unlike other students from Turkey, who they preferred to stay with their compatriots, I stayed with Kyrgyz people during my studies. At the schools where I worked, I mostly taught English, conducted extra lessons for weak and strong students, and guided them when they were preparing for university entry exams.
In time, Yusuf met a Kyrgyz woman he fell in love with and married. He was in a good place. He lived in Bishkek and maintained ties with the Turkish embassy at the time when Turkey, in the 1990s and early 2000s, actively supported the development of Hizmet schools around the world, if not financially, then at least rhetorically. The first crack in that relationship appeared in 2011 and 2012, during secret negotiations between Turkish intelligence and the Kurdistan Workers' Party, a militant Kurdish organization that waged a decades-long insurgency for Kurdish rights, autonomy, and independence, primarily within Turkey. Gulen's supporters favored a more security-oriented approach to dealing with the group. In response to the negotiations, prosecutors and police officers believed to be loyal to the Gulen movement launched large-scale investigations into Kurdish activists, arresting thousands. But the rift between the Gulenists and Erdogan's vision of the state ran deeper.
They weren't happy about Erdogan's consolidation of power. So Erdogan was tolerated as long as he was a prime minister, technocrat, and the primus inter pares, I would say. And when Erdogan started constructing his own authoritarian rule, also started the conflict within the Turkish elites. Since 2013, when the Gezi protests happened in Istanbul, media linked to Gülen movement criticized the government very fiercely. 6 months later, they launched huge anti-governmental campaign based on corruption accusations. So they attacked directly Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his son. So they published some tapes where they were speaking about hiding the money in huge amounts. And that was the first signal to Erdogan that the Gülen is a hostile movement, which is an enemy within their own ranks.
Soon after, a crackdown on Gülen-linked companies and organizations began. Authorities shut down schools and media outlets associated with the movement, including Zaman, once the country's highest circulation newspaper. But the worst was yet to come. On the evening of 15th July 2016, a faction within the Turkish armed forces attempted a coup to overthrow President Erdogan and his party, citing disregard for human rights and democratic rule. They tried to seize key locations in Ankara, Istanbul, and elsewhere, but failed after forces loyal to the government defeated them. That same night, Erdogan claimed he had evidence linking the coup plotters to the Gulen movement, a charge Gulen strongly denied. Hizmet and its various manifestations worldwide were designated by Turkey a terrorist organization. The following morning, mass arrests and purges began. According to the government, 40,000 alleged Gulen supporters were arrested in the first days alone, including thousands of soldiers and judges. Since the coup attempt, approximately 3 million citizens have been investigated and more than 500,000 detained on terrorism-related charges in Turkey, according to the Turkish Ministry of Justice.
Were all those people actually Gulenis or someone who just attended the school or was employed by the company linked to Gulen movement? So this is still a matter of discussion. For some, that was just a reason to consolidate the Erdogan's power, and this is highly controversial.
Today, anyone who has ever been associated with the Hizmet movement is regarded as highly suspicious.
They are pariah, I would say. Being Gulenis is a reason for the social, political, professional anathema, which means Gulenist movement right now is regarded as a parallel structure, anti-state, hated by both Islamists and secularists. By the way, all of them have some reason to be that hostile towards Gulen movement.
The crackdown extended beyond Turkey's borders. Following the coup, Ankara pressured Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan to sever ties with the Hizmet movement and close some of their most successful educational institutions, schools that had benefited tens of thousands of Central Asian students over 2 decades. At the same time, Turkey pursued individuals it believed to be part of the Hizmet movement, like Orhan Inandi and like Yusuf.
Whenever there is a major policy change, the Turkish government finds a scapegoat, and the scapegoat of the Justice and Development Party government has become the Hizmet movement. When the government and the Hizmet movement were getting along well, I was invited to official events, such as Independence Day at the Embassy of Turkey. They had a list of regular invitees from Hizmet schools. At some point, a lazy reporter took it and claimed it was a list of decision-makers in the Hizmet movement in Kyrgyzstan. Even though I've never been in a decision-making position in the movement, I was accused of being one of 35 alleged Hizmet leaders.
As a result, the Turkish embassy refused to issue Yusuf any documents, including a passport.
Of course, they refused to reply to my claims officially, as that would allow me to seek my rights in the courts. This is the dilemma of the current government. They cannot provide evidence of any wrongdoing, as I and many others dedicated our lives to teaching, so they choose to fight against the Hizmet movement outside of the law.
Yusuf has applied for asylum in Kyrgyzstan, and his case is still under review. He does not want to leave. This is where he built his family, raised his children, and spent most of his working life. But it remains unclear whether he will be allowed to stay. He is trapped.
I work online and continue my life, but my passport has expired, and I cannot officially work here. I cannot move to another country, and as an asylum seeker, I cannot get a travel document.
Today, Hizmet schools are simply called Turkish schools. The curriculum has largely remained intact, but Turkish teachers, and in many cases, dormitories, are gone. The schools no longer operate as part of the Hizmet movement. While Hizmet is not banned in Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan, authorities in both countries have distanced themselves from the school's founders in order to maintain good relations with Turkey. But for Mira, Alinur, and Timur, Hizmet schools were formative experiences that shaped how they think about and navigate the world. They remain in touch with their former classmates through lively WhatsApp groups. They are bonded for life. Fethullah Gulen died in October 2024 in the United States. He was 83 years old.
I guess we were kind of weird when we were in school because, again, when you're a 15-year-old boy and you live in a boarding school with all boys, you don't really communicate with the girls. So maybe it gives you impression when you start communicating with the girls that you're some kind of a weirdo. As for the cult, I guess it is because we stuck to each other for a long time after graduation. So it's been almost like 20 years after we graduated. We graduated in 2007. I don't think there are much other people in other schools who will stick with each other for that long period of time. I think that's why it can be seen as a cult.
There are a lot of rumors about us. They call us terrorists. They call us, I don't know, like crazy people. And also, just because it was girls only and boys only, everybody was thinking that we cannot communicate with opposite gender. Everybody, especially in Turkey, they were spreading those rumors that Gülen was preparing us to take over the world. And then we will be everywhere, in every like ministry, in every hospital, in every like, I don't know, everything. And we will have that connection and take out every system that we have, which is not true again. We just went there for a better quality education. That's it.
I might disappoint you, but this story has left many questions unanswered. Did Gülen and his followers really want to take over the world? Or at least seize power in Turkey? I don't know. Is Hizmet a cult-like structure? Perhaps not quite, at least not for the individuals who trusted me enough to share their stories for this podcast. But I don't know what happened behind closed doors. What I do know is that the long arm of the Turkish government is able and willing to shatter the lives of those whose only crime was their passion for teaching, and that these teachers worked in some of the most innovative educational institutions the region has ever seen. And that is bad news. Thank you for listening to this audio feature by Turan Tales. It was produced by me, Agnieszka Pikulicka, and the master of sound, Eva Dunal. Tomek Stankiewicz from Tostanki supported the sound design. Amalia Ibusheva composed the music, and Joe Barnes assisted with the voiceover. Finally, thanks to the International Press Institute for their grant, which made this production possible. If you like our work, please support us on Substack at turantales.substack.com/subscribe. Thank you. Until next month.